Welcome to the Catch Some Soulshine podcast, and I'm your host, Dawn Renee Bova. I'm here to share drastic self-care measures that will help empower you to awaken brilliance after life's darkest moments. Welcome to part one of my interview with Deb Carson. Deb is a former Fox News anchorwoman, and she talks us through being a woman in a man's world. She worked on Wheel of Fortune. I can't wait for you to hear part one. Deb also touches on some struggles that she had, and we'll do a deep dive into that in part two. Please rate the podcast, leave a comment. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment there too. I appreciate you all. Now get a cup of coffee because it's time to catch some soulshine. And today I am joined by my very special guest, Deb.
Well, Deb Carson is,
Deb
McGee was my
Carson.
maiden name, but just Deb
Oh,
Carson, yes.
okay. All right. Deb is an award-winning longtime sports media personality. Her first job was in LA on the Wheel of Fortune production staff. She appeared on dozens of TV shows, films, and has played lots of reporters. Just about to launch her first podcast, and I am so excited for that. That's going to be awesome. And she's also a personal coach for money, career, and mindset. She's also the mom to an 11-year-old amazing competitive swimmer and her 4-year-old lab, Lulu. She became a mother at the age of 46 after multiple losses, and she's married to Chris for 25 years. Wow, that's awesome.
That's a
And
lot to pack in.
it is a lot to pack in, yes. Deb and I met through actually a podcasting course. We kind of formed this little pod of our own. Our little pod is quite special. We're still connected today. So I'm honored to have you on the show. I just got to get this out there since you were the sports caster. So sad about my Browns.
I know. And I know the last time we spoke, I said, yeah, keep hopes up, but it's a long road ahead. Same weekend they were eliminated, by the way, my Cowboys were eliminated too. So I'm right there in the sorrow zone with you for
Mhm,
decades.
mhm.
So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm sorry, but you guys have such great talent on that team too. So the
yeah.
Browns are going to be in the mix for several years to come. So.
Absolutely. I'm excited to watch them. So I want the listeners to get to know you a little bit, like I know you. So why don't you share a little bit about your background?
Well, as you mentioned, I moved out here. It's been a few decades now, but my first job out here was on the game show Wheel of Fortune. I worked on the production staff there. I had always wanted to work in entertainment. In sports is really that was my passion. But when I was growing up, there really weren't opportunities for women, and I had the chance while I was at Baylor. That's my alma mater. I had the chance there to be mentored by a wonderful broadcaster, kind of a legend in Texas at the time, Frank Fallon, had gotten a chance to audition for and work on the Baylor baseball broadcast crew. But by the time I graduated, there really weren't a lot of opportunities for women in sports. So entertainment was, that seemed like a great way to go too. Ended up moving out here without a job, but had sent some resumes out in advance. And the very, very day my parents were driving away, leaving me to live in Los Angeles, I went back inside wondering, oh my gosh, what have I done with my life? What am I doing here? And there was a message on the phone from Wheel of Fortune saying they had an opening there. Then they, had me come in and interview. I ended up working on the game show for several years with an amazing group of people. And obviously, Pat and Vanna are lovely and wonderful and the epitome of what celebrities should be and what people should be for that matter. Very, very kind and giving. But ended up leaving there and doing a lot of on camera work just by virtue of being around a lot of it. Ultimately, I had a chance to come back and get a job in my field that I really was passionate about, and that was sports. So I started working at Fox Sports Radio in 2006 and was there on the air, just started out weekend overnights and worked my way into better positions on the weekends and then started full time in 2010 when the Stephen A. Smith show started, and I was selected to be his co-host. So I was there from 2006 all the way through the start of 2022. So that is kind of the career part in a nutshell. It's funny when you read it off all at once, it sounded like, wow, that's a lot. Then you have to realize that was spread out over a few decades.
Incredible. I mean, first
Oh,
of all, what courage to move across the country and just get plopped off, start your life. I mean,
oh.
that's incredible courage,
Well,
and,
thank you. But I think my parents always encouraged me because again, you and I both know life can be very long, life can also be very short. So pursue things that light you up, pursue things that you're passionate about if you have the opportunity. I realize everybody's path is different, but they always encourage me to, if there's a fork in the road, think about it, pray about it, figure out, okay, do I want to go? Do I want to not? And then choose your path, go forward, and don't look back, because when you get into the what ifs and gee, I wish I would have's, that doesn't suit anybody. So you have to just say, you know what, I'm going to close that door at least for now, and I'm going to move forward in this direction. For me, it's been kind of a crazy winding path, but there's not much I would change, I don't think. I mean, I might make things a little bit easier in in some regards. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a lot of fun along the way. And when you love what you do, obviously work doesn't seem like work.
I love hearing that. So many people do a replay of their life and they think, I wish I would have done this or I should have done that. I think it's so important. Even with me, when I graduated high school, it was nursing school, art school. What's it going to be? And I've always loved art. I've always loved it. I chose nursing because I wanted that stability. I wanted that for sure. I'm going to have a job. I don't regret that. I think it's been a part of my path to complete this nursing journey that I'm on. And, I'm helping people with addiction and mental health right now, which is so important. What you can do is infuse the things that you love into your path. And what isn't that a Yogi Berra, the fork in the road statement? Didn't he say something like that?
Oh my goodness, there are so many yogiisms. I don't know specifically which one, but I'm sure I could probably Google it right now and find it. But
Yeah.
when you come, I think it was when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Yes.
Isn't that what he said?
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh,
So, I mean,
yeah.
you don't look back, you just keep moving forward. There's no wrong turn because you can get back onto another path. It's all a learning experience, and I think I'm in a season of my life right now where I'm happy with the things that I've done, and I'm happy with the things that are coming forward. And I think that's where you're at too, kind of a little fork in the road from, broadcasting to now with your podcast, which what's the name of your podcast again?
It's called Powered by Purpose with Deb Carson. And you're right, I'm combining a lot of the things that I love in the podcast, because obviously, I mean, I'm passionate about the X's and O's and what goes on the field and on the court, but the stories that really just, made my heart swell and my eyes water are the stories about the guys and gals who were using their platform to bring about positive change, whether it was, the Dolphins back, the year they had a couple of really bad hurricanes. A couple of the guys said, hey, for every tackle I make, I'm going to donate $10,000 to hurricane relief, things like that. And even like I remember there was a story, a really poignant story, a little leaguer who's, I think his teammate had lost a parent to cancer. So he was selling lemonade and raising money for cancer research. The whole point is we all can use whatever our gifts are, whether it's time or a dollar or our platform, if we have a big platform, to bring about positive change. It took me a long time. It's taken me actually 13 years to get to the point where I'm launching the podcast, believe it or not. And I'll get to that story later too. But I think a lot of it had to do with finding what exactly is it that I want to talk about. Do I want to talk about
Mhm.
sports all the time? I love sports and I do, but at the same time, I wanted this to be almost like a passion project. I want it to be something that, even if there was never a dime that came out of it, this is my fun hobby that I do. And what would I really love to talk about? And the things that light me up are the people who are using their platform and using their gifts and their talents to bring about positive change. And you are, Dawn. I mean, every day, obviously, with your nursing background, with what you're doing with your art and using art to heal and teaching other people how to use their art to heal and starting the ripple experiment. I've always talked about ripple effect anytime I get a chance to do public speaking, because I think every act of kindness inevitably brings about one or two or 500 additional acts of kindness. And we'll never know what exactly the result will be. But anyway, that's what lit me up. And to get to where the podcast first came from, as far as the concept of having a podcast, I'd never thought about it. But as in 2010, as the Stephen A. Smith show was coming to an end on Fox Sports Radio, I had so many listeners reaching out like, we're gonna hear your opinions. I know you're still gonna be on the network doing news and the updates and that sort of thing, but I want to hear what you're talking about every day. And I was like, I don't know, I don't want to do a podcast. I don't know how to do a podcast. And at that time, the only person I knew who had one was one of the guys on the network, Eddie Garcia, had the Puck podcast, which is still going strong. But I remember him being there at the studio nights and weekends recording those things. I was like, well, but I've got my work and we're trying to have a child at the time. So I just kind of kept putting it on the back burner. And actually, it was the workshop through which I met you, Dawn, that
Mhm.
finally, and actually, you ladies also in my pod, being involved and being surrounded with people who are kind of all working toward a common cause or a common passion, it gives you the good, kick in the seat that you need to to get off your duff and get something going. That's kind of
Right.
the long story to how we got here today with my particular story. But you inspire
I
me with what you're doing.
thank you. I was just on social media today. Oh, there's a lot of hoopla about Taylor Swift, the publicity she's getting, and I read something that said, "Well, they're just there to play football and entertain us," and I that just rubbed me the wrong way because I agree with everything you just said. We have a responsibility, I think, to ripple kindness out into the world, make positive change, and what better platform than if you're a sports person or anything, theater, it doesn't matter. Why wouldn't you wanna use your platform for good? That just doesn't
Absolutely.
make sense to me that people say that. So I'm glad you pointed that out because, yes, we do have a responsibility. Good for Taylor.
And by the way, I will go on record as saying 6 months ago, I mean, obviously I knew who she was very well and appreciated the pop music that I knew of, but because I have a daughter who at the time was 10, who was becoming a hardcore Swiftie, I started listening to and by the way, Taylor Swift is, I think, solely responsible for bringing vinyl back too. Vinyl records were going out when I was a kid, and that's
Mhm.
all my daughter wanted for Christmas were the vinyl versions of Taylor Swift. We pulled out the old record player and we've got Taylor going now. But I think, I mean, again, I think her lyrics are great. I think it's crazy to me that people knock her for writing about her relationships, knocking about her life experience, where every band, every musician who's ever sung a song, they're those songs are all based on their lives and their relationships. So I have no idea why she's such a target, because I guess she's a big target, so they've got to find something wrong with her. But she's so philanthropic. She's so
Mhm.
good to her fans. And it's funny because I guess I've become a Swiftie who's probably 3 decades too old to be a Swiftie, but I guess I am one. But I so appreciate the role model that she is for girls. And she points out the double standards in between men and women. Men are allowed to date whoever they want to and never get knocked. And she got knocked for that. And the other silly thing is I've heard so many sports people, if you will, talking about, well, she's using him for publicity. I think Taylor was
Yeah.
doing fine without Travis, and Travis was doing just fine without Taylor. He's one of the best tight ends in the history of the league. He's a huge star, had a ton of ad campaigns. I guarantee you that she has brought more eyeballs to the NFL, especially in the girls 8 to 14 category, than ever probably would have watched a game, and they watch intently now. Now, full disclosure, of course, they're watching to see if they're going to do a cutaway, to Taylor in the booth, but she's bringing eyeballs and she's bringing future fans to the NFL. Anyway, even my daughter, who is mandated to be a Cowboys fan because that's that's what we are. I let
Yeah.
her choose, her own LA team because she's growing up here. So I thought, well, that's only fair. A few weeks ago, she said, "Mom, can I get a Chiefs jersey?" And I was like, "What?" But I mean, that shows you the impact that
Right.
she and he together are having. So I don't understand why people are complaining about their relationship. Let them have fun, let them be kind to each other, hopefully. Who knows where the relationship goes? But they both seem like great people. And I think, again, she's bringing a ton of positive attention to the NFL. I'm sure he probably has raised her awareness among maybe guys 40 to 60 who don't have a 10-year-old daughter.
Yeah,
Have fun,
every,
enjoy.
interview from his teammates that I've seen have nothing but positive to say about her. Nothing. No negativity. In the world we live in with social media, it's easy to become a target behind the keyboard. That's just the reality of the world we live in, but that's not the type of world that I want to be promoting. Let's talk about your experience with becoming a mother at age 46. My mom, her mother was 43 when she had her.
Wow. Oh, that's
Mhm.
amazing. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing she probably didn't have the help from science that I was able to have because
No.
of, yeah, the time. That's amazing.
Right. I remember that special relationship with my mom and my grandma because she had, a lot of boys, and then several years later, she had my mom. In today's society, like, it's just so cool to see, you have the career, and now you have this beautiful daughter who is a great competitive swimmer, I've seen.
She
So
loves it. She's having a great time. She just aged up from 10 and under into the 11 and 12 category. So the times get, much faster that you have to meet to go to certain meets. It's just fun to see her discover things, on her own passions. I was not a swimmer. I mean, I swam for fun. Just to see her become like she's always been like a super mellow, happy-go-lucky kid, but to see all of a sudden a couple of years ago like a switch flip and suddenly she's like, "You know what? I want to win. I want to do this. I want to be good," and just to see her kind of come into her she's
yeah,
coming into her own basically and having her own
yeah.
passions and
My oldest was, in competitive swimming, so I remember what that's all about. Boy, those meets last a long time, and what a great form of exercise. It's a really neat sport. Will you share a little bit about I'm assuming you had some struggle with fertility. Probably that was a little bit of darkness that you had to go through,
oh yeah,
before you had your daughter.
absolutely. And I, again, I was not a woman who, from the time I was born said, I want to have kids. I want to have kids. I was always like, yeah, if it happens, that's fine. But I never was, I want to get married. I want to have kids. I didn't have that timeline set out. And I was definitely more career driven than a lot of my friends were. Certainly. A lot of them, got married as soon as they got out of high school or out of college and started their families. But I think because I was on a career path and on multiple career paths, just the way that everything wound. And I think also because the guy I married was, I mean, he's a little bit older, like 8 years older, which at the time was a lot, but now obviously is nothing. Neither of us had that, we have to have kids thing. And I think we were just so busy career wise. And he had a very high level career as well at the time. And so I think we were just busy with that. Honestly, once I got to the network and I'd had some success there, I just remember there was a time when I was like, is there something, there's something I forgot to do? And it's funny because I haven't really talked about this a lot, but as you can understand, I was in a male dominated environment. So I was already trying not to stand out as far as, among my coworkers as being different. So I certainly didn't talk about any of this at work. We got pregnant, believe it or not, and I was almost 41 the very, very first time we tried. And we just thought, "Oh my gosh, is this gonna happen?" And we were very hush hush about it because I knew that obviously you've got to get past the first trimester, or I should say when I started to think about, wow, I'm gonna have a kid. This is amazing. And you start to think about all the possibilities and you start to think about that little person in your life. And then when you realize a few weeks later that it's not to come going to come to fruition, I tend to have a determination innate within me that is like, okay, kind of like that, tell me no and I'm going to show you how I'm going to make it happen kind of thing. And I didn't obviously I know that there's God is involved, miracles are involved, science is involved too. But at that point, once we had that loss and kind of got over, I don't know that I got over it, but got over the initial shock, then it was like, okay, I don't want to go through that feeling again, blindsided. Let's find out what the reality is of the situation. And so we talked about it and we both agreed, well, let's try and see what happens. And it's funny because I haven't really talked about this a lot, but as you can understand, I was in a male dominated environment. So I was already trying not to stand out as far as, among my coworkers as being different. So I certainly didn't talk about any of this at work. When you start then at that point, wow, I'm gonna have a kid. This is amazing. And you start to think about all the possibilities and you start to think about that little person in your life. And then when you realize a few weeks later that it's not to come gonna come to fruition, at that point, once we had that loss, then it was like, okay, I don't want to go through that feeling again. Let's find out what the reality is of the situation.
Thanks for joining me today on the Catch Some Soulshine podcast. Deb is an amazing woman who has forged a path in a man's world, but she remained authentic and true to herself. In part two, we're going to do a deep dive into what it was like for Deb to go through IVF. She did have a lot of darkness during that time, but her story did end well with a beautiful daughter, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Join me next week for part two with Deb Carson. And please check out the promo because if you want to ripple some kindness out into the world, check out ripple.dawnreneebove.com. It's DAWNRENEEBOVA.com because I am starting the Ripple experiment where we ripple art to various people throughout the world. And it's been so well received. All right. See you next week.